Comic book and manga fans, this is H. German from Sigma Comics, and today we're going to talk about a big problem in Comic Cons. It's the big 2020s Comic Con problem. You didn't know there was a problem? There is. We're going to talk about it right away. Before we will, make sure you sit down, you get a nice drink, because we're going to go in depth into this issue. It was a problem that was raised by one of our friends here. So get your favorite drink. I got mine here. I got the Calico mug. You don't see it. It's a little blurry. There it is. Going to take a drink. Well, let's tell you who we are. We're Sigma Comics. We fight animal abuse through comics and manga. Through our series, Here Comes Calico. You can check it out on our website. Look at all our products here. We got comic books. We got trade paperbacks. We have manga. We have merch. And let's talk about this problem. It's a problem that was brought to our attention by one of our friends, as I mentioned before, but really it's something that a lot of people talk about, and by people I mean exhibitors, mainly exhibitors in the different areas of the convention center, like Artist Alley and Small Press. You know, we're typically smaller exhibitors. It has to do with the rising costs of these conventions. Okay, from time to time, this becomes a discussion that is brought forward to, in many cases, the showrunners at these conventions. And sometimes it's individually, sometimes it's collectively, but we're seeing a trend in specifically in the 2020s, and that's really what we're talking about today. So I mentioned before that it was one of our friends that brought it to attention formally, and he did it via a Facebook post. Our friend is Onrie. He's just a wonderful indie creator. He's one of many indie creators out there that have concerns, and we share, frankly, his concerns, and so do hundreds of others, as we'll find out in this very thoughtful and insightful question that he poses to the convention community. All right, so here I'm going to go ahead and read his post, his Facebook post. Again, very thoughtful here and insightful. So this is Onrie. I've been noticing a troubling trend. Conventions are consistently raising the cost of exhibiting, even as it becomes clear they're making more from attendees than from exhibitors. This is now creating a pattern that's concerning, especially for full-time creators such as myself. The idea that prices have to increase every year, or that you're required to pay 100% up front to rebook the following year or lose your spot, makes it incredibly difficult for many creators to manage their businesses. I understand that costs go up, but the pricing often feels unnecessarily inflated and disconnected from what creators actually earn at these shows. Where does it stop? Over the past 5 to 10 years, I've seen exhibition spaces nearly double in cost at many shows, and that's just not sustainable for a lot of people. Some dealers and creators I know personally have stopped attending certain conventions because it simply isn't worth their time. Is this really the kind of lasting impression conventions want fans to experience? Also, profits at shows are never guaranteed to increase year over year. So where's the justification for continuously raising booth costs? At times, it feels like we're being slowly priced out of these spaces we helped build, spaces that were essentially to creating the vibrant culture of these events. That's an important piece he just mentioned here. All of it's very important, but this is one piece I'm going to get to later in the video. If this trend continues, we risk discouraging future generations of artists from pursuing creative careers. Long-time veterans will be forced to raise prices so that fans may not be able to afford the work anymore, and no one wins in that scenario. I'm not pointing fingers at any convention, but I do think this is something we need to address openly. Let's have a dialogue about it before it gets out of hand. Lastly, please be kind and considerate when commenting. Anyone calling out specific shows or creators will have their comments. All right, well, he's talking specifically about his post. Okay, so there's tons of validity to what Onrie has to say here. Okay, of course, the showrunners have a counterpoint to that perspective, because the truth is that many of these shows are actually increasing their rebookings, and the amount of time that they actually fill up is actually getting shorter and shorter. So it's hard from their perspective, of course, to see all of Onrie's points here, because frankly, the showrunners are seeing the profits. They're seeing uh, the money go up from their perspective, and at the same time, they also have costs themselves, which they also see coming up. So it's a very difficult scenario for the showrunners to fully digest, and understand from the creative standpoint. But again, these are all very, very valid points that Onrie is bringing up. All right, so uh, you know what I think the biggest problem, there's lots of problems, but I really think personally, after reading Onrie's post and being a creator like Onrie and many others out there who share Onrie's concerns, really the biggest problem is in what I mentioned before, the point I mentioned before, how we the creators, the comic book creators, actually created this. Okay, remember they're Comic Cons. Okay, they're not anime cons, they're not Funko cons. What actually created what we know today as pop culture or Comic Cons, the name is right in the name of the convention. It's Comic Cons. It all started with San Diego Comic Con, all right, back in the 70s, early 70s, and that's what it was. It was a comic book convention. That's where all of this started. It is the lifeblood. It is the foundation of all pop culture conventions. Comic Cons. That's right. Okay, so how do you go to, and by the way, again to Henri's point before, you know, this is the platform. It's comics. Okay, and what we've seen is because of these prices, because of other factors such as low readership, and this is another conversation altogether, but it ties into this 2020's comic book convention problem. Okay, remember, we've been doing comic book conventions since 2021, since the beginning of the decade, the 2020s. Okay, and what we've seen, us Sigma Comics, is fewer and fewer people interested or even reading comics, and more are reading things like graphic novels, manga, and some of them aren't even going to conventions for comics or manga or anything. They're going for cosplay or tchotchkes that have nothing to do with the actual convention, right? So this is pretty concerning. I mean, think about this for a second. How do you go to a Comic Con and not read comics? I mean, it's borderline insane. It doesn't even make sense. It's incoherent, right? Imagine going to a music concert and not listening to music. It doesn't even make sense. And you can say, well, there's other things. Yeah, there's other things, but the main thing that has always been the foundation has been comics. And you can say, well, yeah, things change, and I understand things change, but comics aren't going anywhere. Okay, the sales prove it. How is it that we, as a very small indie creator, are selling out at every convention we go to, and we bring hundreds of pounds of comics? Okay, yet we still, it's not easy because I would say, and I'll address it in the next piece, the next slide of this video. There's reasons for this, okay, and conventions are in a situation where they could really do something big to change that. In fact, in my view, they're the best positioned to change this. We can talk about why things are the way they are. In fact, I'm going to go to the next slide because I really think that we have at least one idea, and this is just one. There are many out there, and I think that Onrie does a great job here by starting the dialogue, right? And this is our, or my, I should say, response to Onrie's post. And by the way, I'm going to link Onrie's original Facebook post in the description. And I'm also going to link my response to a follow-up post that Onrie did. But here's my response to the issue. Thanks for bringing up this topic, Onrie. You're a true credit to this industry. We, Sigma Comics, are one of the few publishers that rival Onrie's exposure and experience on the convention circuit. Over the past 4 years of conventioning, it's become clear to us that only a fraction of attendees actively read comic books. We approximate between 10 and 25%, of course, depending on the event. Lots of different conventions out there. But how can you go to a Comic Con and not read comics? Imagine going to a music concert and not listening to music. I brought the example up already. There are many reasons for the low comic readership, which is another topic. But what is clear is that comics are in a dire state in the US. Conventions have an excellent opportunity to assume a cultivating role in changing this. Instead of forcing customers to buy at least one comic book at a comic book convention, which of course isn't feasible, conventions who have long been criticized by their exorbitant fee attendee prices can give each attendee a $10 comic credit, or comic books if you will, a play on comic books, that the attendee can use to buy a comic book, and only a new comic book. This ensures that everyone at the convention will at least buy one comic. Imagine shows like Comic-Con International or New York Comic Con with over 100,000 attendees now generating an additional 100,000 comic purchases. You can see how this would be a great thing for creators, but also attendees who can now on a consistent and steady basis be exposed to new comics every year. Conventions can really do something great for comics at this time, and boy, is it ever needed. Okay? So that was my idea, the comic books idea. Let me tell you why. Some of you who don't read comics or don't understand the gravity of the issue. Okay? I'm going to lightly address it because it's a very deep topic. The bottom line is, listen, folks, you know, in the 80s and 90s when I was reading comics, they were absolutely everywhere. And I'm talking about everywhere. Supermarkets, grocery stores, delis, pharmacies, candy stores, which is where I started reading them as a young kid. 7-Elevens, magazine stores, newsstand, cigar shops, those Optimo, Te Amo, corner shops where they had all the magazines. They were in there. They were in gas stations, folks. Okay, comic books were in gas stations. They were everywhere, anywhere. Card shop. Remember they back in the day used to have before. I'm dating myself here. Before you had, cards. Those personal greeting cards that you give people, like, birthday cards or wedding cards or whatever. Before they were in Walgreens and in the pharmacies or in Walmart, they were actually dedicated greeting card stores back in the day, like Hallmark card stores. Okay, there were actually Hallmark card stores back in the day. There was one in my neighborhood. Okay, so obviously those have been merged into Walmart's, Targets, pharmacies, etc., etc. But you could get comics there. All right, you can get comics anywhere. So the bottom line is, this has changed. And again, we're not going to go into why that is, but the truth is that since the 2000s, since the beginning of the 2000s, comics have no longer been available just anywhere. They're mainly only available in comic book shops, what we as creators call the direct market. All right. Now, what does that do? It means that millions of people who were reading comics before can't get them. And not only that, but the new generations don't even know, some of them don't even know what comics are. Yet, again, tons of people buy comics at conventions and at the direct market, the comic book stores. Okay? That's really the only place a young person, okay, I'm talking about anyone under the age of, 25, 20, 25, can even see a comic book. A lot of these people don't even know what a comic book store is, so their only really interaction with a comic book is at a comic book convention, at a con. Now, mind you, they have no problem, they have no problem recognizing, Comic-Con in San Diego or New York Comic Con, all these big shows, but they don't even, in some cases, they haven't even read a comic book before. Okay, so obviously, this is a problem. It's a big problem. Think about it. All right, so this solution, which is the idea that I bring forward, which is giving all attendees comic books. Well, comic books would be great, right? Imagine you have an additional value add to your purchase, and these tickets can get expensive, and they're getting more expensive every year. As an attendee, you're paying upwards of $70, $80, $90 just a day to get into one of these conventions in some cases, right? Not all of them are like that. Some of them are, 20 to 40, $50, but the bigger ones are upwards of 70, 80, $90, right? Each. Each, okay? It's not one family goes in, it's each of these tickets. So if you got a family of, 4 or 5, you're going to drop a big piece of coin there, right? It can be worked out between the small indie comic, artist alley, small press conventioneer with the convention to work out a great deal whereby the convention can mass, provide an additional value add to the attendee, while at the same time providing excellent value uh, to the exhibitor, the small press and artist alley exhibitor, right? The small guy who is paying top dollar to get into these conventions and exhibit and sell their wares, i.e., comics, right? So it's a win-win. And here we see an exhibitor running in extra motivated to go into the con because now they have an additional thing for their value. And again, this could be worked out. The conventions could really do a big thing here. And I can guarantee you the attendees are going to be very happy for lots of reasons because A, they're able to provide something, an additional thing and an essential thing at a Comic-Con, right? To themselves and to their family members. Okay, the new generation is happy because now they're interfacing guaranteed. They're all being exposed to this thing that they didn't even know existed before. All right, and I was a kid, and I was going into the candy store. Of course, I wanted candy, right? Every kid likes candy, but then you look around and you see, what are those things? I see superheroes in here. And then, of course, as you get older, you start with the cartoons and animations and all sorts of other things. And then you get really into comics, as I did. Well, if you give a kid or a ticket holder the opportunity to be exposed to a new comic book, boy, you're creating a whole new hobby for the kid potentially. All right, and that does wonderful things for that child and that family. And again, you're adding an additional value add. And you, as a convention showrunner, you can do this. You have the ability to do this because you don't have to pay the top dollar. You can work it out with the exhibitor, the small press and artist alley exhibitor, right? The comic creator. And of course, the comic book creator is ecstatic because now they have an additional benefit coming to them at the show. They have guaranteed comic book purchasers, many of which hadn't even been customers before. I mean, that is a very, very attractive thing for us, an artist alley, small press creators. So again, small. These are new comics, not existing comics from the 60s and 70s that are, $1,000, $2,000 each. I'm talking about the small artist alley, people who are creating their own stuff, the new creators that are in artist alley, that are in small press. Okay, the small vendor portions of the convention center. Guys, and by guys I mean convention showrunners, okay? I'm talking to you right now. There is in fact an issue, okay? There are tons of people out there, these small creators that really find it difficult because remember, some of them have to travel. It's not just your convention. It's the hotel, it's the airfare, it's the Ubers, it's the meals. Some of them have multiple people on their teams. It really does add up, guys. It really does. And I know you guys provide a wonderful benefit for them. At the same time, recognize that they're also struggling. And some of them, as Onrie mentioned in his post, they're having a really hard time of it. So if you as a convention showrunner can add an additional value that benefits not only the attendee, but also the exhibitor, again, the small press and artist alley exhibitor who creates their own stuff, wow, you're doing a wonderful thing for not only these two entities, but all comics in general. Well, you have the ability to transform the industry by this simple program. And again, you can most certainly work it out. There's a way to do this. And if and when you do, you're only going to get more and more people coming to these things because now through word of mouth and through enhanced customer experience at these shows, well, you're doing a fantastic thing that's going to impact your bottom line. You most certainly can count on higher attendance at these shows. You're going to have more exhibitors now trying to come into your shows because they're seeing increased value, and you're also dramatically positively impact the overall comic book industry, okay? Because remember, you're just one show. Imagine if all the shows did this, okay? If all the shows around the country had a standard sort of comic books uh, additional value as part of their ticket purchase at a comic book convention, you're going to have tens of thousands more readers every single year wanting to get the latest and greatest comic book stuff. Because remember, showrunner at the Comic-Con, these small indie creators have a hard time getting into the stores. So where will it be the best place for them to bring their exclusives to? At your convention. They can get these things nowhere else but at your convention. So you are literally guaranteeing growth over growth, year over year, not only in the industry, but also the two parties that you serve, the attendees and the exhibitors. Remember, there are three injured parties here. You might not think you're an injured party. Let's look at the injured parties here. The attendee. The attendee is always complaining about how expensive ticket prices are. You don't believe it? Go look at social media. In every single post that I've seen at these conventions, there's always someone griping about, oh, this is too expensive. You guys already know this. And by guys, again, I mean the showrunners. You're seeing people complaining about, so what? You know what? Keep the price the same. Give them an additional value add. Give them a credit for a comic book. It doesn't have to be $10. It could be, maybe it's just worked out that by each and every Artist Alley and small press exhibitor that sells comics, that they're participating in the, comic books program. And they have to set aside, certain comics, and they're going to be, whatever it is, there's a way to work it out. There is a way to work this one out. I absolutely am certain of this because you have the resources and the ability to interact and create the program whereby you can do it affordably so that both parties, that being the attendees and the small press and Artist Alley exhibitors who create comics, can participate and can count on a new sale and B, a new purchase. You're creating the market right there in your own, inside your own halls of your conventions. Okay? So the attendee, harmed, injured party right now because they're complaining about your expensive prices. 2, injured party, the small press indie creator that creates comics. They're injured because, as Onrie pointed out there, and as I definitely agree, they're paying a lot overall. Remember, it's not just your convention they're paying for all the corollary costs that come with it. So they're griping about the prices, right? The third injured party is the comic book convention itself. You, the showrunner. You're an injured party. You don't know it yet because you have not seen the complete collapse of the comic book industry. You don't think that if people stop buying comics, that's not going to have an impact at your Comic-Con? Oh, yes, it will. It most certainly will. And we are seeing it. We're telling you because we're seeing it every single show. Folks, we do between 30 and 40 shows a year all around the country. Okay, and actually we're flying international because we did London this year. We see it. We've been seeing it since 2021. People are not buying as many comics as they used to, and there's a big reason for that. Again, it's a whole different conversation, but let's just say some of these bigger comic book publishers, they've really dropped the ball over the past 15 to 20 years. They had big opportunities to not let that happen, but they did. And it's because of their mismanagement of their companies that comics are not available everywhere, because they were available everywhere. All right, but they're not anymore. Okay, distribution is not what it is. So the promotion of comics in the country isn't what it used to be. And that's going to impact. In fact, it's already starting to impact your businesses. You may not be seeing it yet because you're counting on other sales, other things that are hot and trending. But what happens when those things aren't as hot anymore? Like everything happens where trends fade. Okay? And you can no longer count on your bread and butter that's always been the comics. Well, guess what? You're going to be a very injured party. It's going to be a rude awakening. You need to cultivate. It is your absolute responsibility to make sure that the essence, the foundation of Comic Cons, for Christ's sakes, are supported by you, comic book convention runner. You cannot let this fall down, and you have a magnificent opportunity right now to create a program whereby everybody wins. Everybody wins, and you ultimately win in the end because you can count on ongoing sales, attendance, happy customers, etc., 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 etc. It's a win-win. Anyway, something to think about. It's a got to thank again Onrie for bringing forth the topic. I think he's again, he's a credit to the industry. He's a hardworking guy. He's got great comics. Check his stuff out. I'm gonna go ahead and put Onrie's channel or website so you can take a look at what he's got on his comics, what he's selling. But the bottom line is, we can all do this together. The attendees, the exhibitors, and the conventions who are running these conventions, we all have a tremendous opportunity. And really, it's up to the conventions, because the conventions are the ones that are running these shows, and they have the ability to make it all work for the attendee and the small press artist alley exhibitor. Anyway, that's my thought. And what do you think? Chime down below. Give us a comment. What was the last show you went to? Would you have been happy if you had a nice comic books credit? Go in and buy a comic from from an indie creator. Would that work for you? How about you, small press creator or artist alley creator of comic books? What do you think of the idea? Would you like to be able to count on new customers coming in and getting new comics from you from these conventions? I know for one I would certainly be. And how about you, showrunner? What do you think of the idea? I understand you have costs too, and they're growing on your side. So we understand the situation. That's why it might not be lowering the ticket price, right? This idea does not cause you to lower your ticket price. It keeps it the same. All you're doing is providing just an additional bullet point of the things that you already offer. Whether you offer a tote bag, and a free guide or whatever you guys do currently, offering a free comic book would, especially if you can work out a good deal with everybody participating, meaning all the small press and indie creators and Artist Alley, you can make this work and everything would work out. That's my 2 cents anyway. Listen, as always, keep on fighting for animals, and we love comics, and so do you. So let's do this together. Win-win. Fight for animals.